In today's episode, you'd like me to resign? How about I fire myself from this job instead? I must fulfill the guest's demands to the best of my ability? Yes, ma'am. Do you know who I am? So let's get started. You'd like me to resign? How about I fire myself from this job instead? Part 1, New Job. This happened about a year ago now, but I still think back to it from time to time and appreciate how well it unfolded. I work in software and took a job at a small medium-sized software company in 2018. The company was family-owned and I went high school with the CEO's daughter. The place itself was rampant with nepotism and the company culture wasn't great. Sexist comments and humorous racist remarks were common, but I needed a job and this was one of the few options I had. My title was project coordinator, but I was quickly relegated to buying lunches for the team and such. At one point when the lottery reached 500 million, the CTO asked me to dress like Randy Savage and get a pool together. I spent a whole day buying lottery tickets. I hated it but kept thinking if I paid my dues, I'd get a shot at some real work and growth. Eventually I got a chance to handle recruiting and doing intro calls for new hires. It was brutal but yet again I kept pushing through. Part 2, I hate it here. It was a 6-month contract to hire situation, and they made me an offer which I was able to negotiate from $40K to $55K, which felt like validation finally. Sadly nothing changed after this. I kept buying lunches and setting up calls that I wouldn't be included in. Around this time 1:1s essentially ended for me. What was a monthly cadence with my boss, the CTO, turned to once every 3 months and finally he had me reporting the CEO's daughter, who would then conduct my 1:1s. I was open about my frustrations, and I was promised that in January 2020 they would move me out of hiring. January came and went. Part 3, Mal-compliance. February and I finally had a meeting with the CTO. I got to his office only to be told that there was no other role for me, and now that we had hired more people, we didn't have a need for my services anymore on the tech team. I pushed harder and essentially the CEO's daughter didn't have faith in me, and that was that. He politely suggested I resign, and they'd give me a letter of recommendation. We went back and forth and he finally mentioned that there was another opening on another team, but he thought that would be a bad role for me. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. He showed all his hands at that point, and I knew I could make this work for me. The next day I updated my DICE profile, and within 24 hours had 2 interviews set up. I then told him I needed a few days to think things over, and that I was taking PTO. I went home and waited, watched Nacho Libre and prepped for interviews. That day he texted me asking me general work questions. Day 2 he finally broke down and asked over text if I wanted to be let go or resign. He actually wrote that in text form. I told him I was still thinking about the other role and hadn't made a decision. I then had dinner with the founder of the company. The other role was on his team. He was the CEO's husband and he and I always got along. I laid out everything I went through. That night I emptied most of my office, and the next day the CTO called livid telling me I was handling this the wrong way, and this was making it difficult for them. 2 days later, after using some of my PTO, I walked into the VP of HR's office and told her to fire me. She looked at me confused and said that a manager normally needs to tell her that. I showed her printed out screenshots of our texts and a log of my 1:1s. Citing that if they were firing me for cause then you'd think this would look more consistent. Fallout. I was fired and at this point I had a job lined up already. Shutdown hit and that offer was delayed, but because I was fired I could claim unemployment. This hit them, and they even tried to claim they gave me severance, but I had all my pay stubs and proved otherwise. The CEO's daughter straight up stopped talking to me, and they ended up giving up their office and moving into a co-working space. I got a job as a legit PM at a Fortune 50 software company. I bought a Lincoln. My life is 100x better. My parents voted for the first time this year, and I went with them. They live close to that co-working space, and with as much salt as possible, I linked up with a few folks I actually liked at the company, and they told me to come over. I spent a half day working in the same space as them with the biggest grin on my face. And that's how I left my previous company. As a kid they tell you don't get fired. As an adult, sometimes it's the smartest option. I must fulfill the guest's demands to the best of my ability? Yes, ma'am. On a phone, so sorry for format issues. For clarity, agent and client are same person. So a few years ago, I used to work at a country estate. It was a neoclassical Palladian mansion to give it its proper title, and is a listed building that was restored and won prestigious titles for the restoration. The important thing to note is that this is defined as a house, not a hotel, so there is no permanent staffing rota for the butlers/waiting staff. We were offered shifts for events, and the only permanent staff were management, groundskeepers, spa staff and the chef. This means the waiting staff had very little protection in terms of working hours, etc. This place often attracted the kind of money that people paid other people to organize their holiday for them, and was something to equivalent of 5 stars plus. I had earned a reputation with these agents who were repeat clients as one of their favorite staff, on a first-name basis, brought them coffee in their morning meetings, etc. In particular, this story came after one New Year's event these clients had run where I worked 20 hours non-stop on Hogmanay, New York Eve. The management staff totally changed soon after this event. The new management structure comprised of a new GM and a front-of-house (FA) and back-of-house (BO) deputies. They weren't really aware of previous staff track records and simply had a list of names of staff for call-in. I immediately got on with new GM and BO. They liked my ideas and often implemented them. I knew the house very well and what unexpected issues happened, instead of FA's ideas, and this irked FA somewhat. She would try and reduce hours I was offered or ask me to complete impossible tasks at times, such as running a 5-star plus dinner service alone for 20 guests for over an hour while she pulled other staff away for other stuff. The most important line she ever said though when I said I needed help at points was, "You must do everything within your power to make sure the guests are happy, Bob. Any demand they make, you do your best to meet it." This irked me as given the reputation of this place I knew that was already a given. I knew it was speak not unless spoken to, and if they asked you to dance like a chicken for their enjoyment, you did it. MC began simply waiting to happen. Fast forward a couple months to another event organized by the specific repeat clients, a diamond wedding anniversary. The event just so happened to coincide with a Six Nations rugby game. Me and one other staff member were massive rugby nuts, and would regularly talk about it in downtime, and it just so happened one of the repeat clients was also a fan. It was a standard afternoon session in the house, many people in many different rooms, and I just so happened to be working from the butler pantry across the TV room inside, which is an old man, let's call him Stanley. He is sharp as a tack but lovely, and he's chatting to the client, with the rugby on the TV, saying he wished he had someone to watch it with. The client mentions I like rugby to him, and he says, "Oh, it'd be grand if you could join an old fella to chat," and as much as I'd live to, I have to politely decline as I am on shift, although I do mention that my job is to do everything within my power to ensure the guests are happy and meet their demands as best I can. Stanley has a twinkle in his eye and the client get this look on his face of oh no as Stanley turns to me, and says, "Very well then, I demand you sit and watch the rugby with me and talk with me." Correct, Stanley just MC'd me, so naturally I just follow on and reply, "Of course sir, certainly sir," and meanwhile the agent is struggling so hard to keep a straight face the veins popping out his head nearly punched me. After all, I was just following demands to the letter. Soon enough word gets back to Fa, and she comes in with this unique face of polite rage, and asked why I wasn't serving other guests, and Stanley just pipes up saying I demanded he sit with me, and he is fulfilling my demand to the best of his ability. I just looked and shrugged with the straightest face possible, but also trying to crack a sh*t eating grin slightly too. She starts going red and the client comes in and tells her it's true before she politely storms off to the GM, who I am told by Bo burst into laughter upon hearing the story in her office. Spent the rest of the match getting Stanley drinks and talking to him and the client about the game, got paid for it all too. Do you know who I am? Been reading many of these militarious compliance stories, and made me remember my own. So when you're working a gate or any sort of security post, you get used to some of the same people coming through and don't really need to check their ID, such as your relief. The same delivery driver that's already come through 5 times on just your shift, friends and or family, so you just wave them through. Counts as like visual confirmation. Well, we had some joker that was getting kicked out of the military, and decided he didn't really care who was coming and so would just wave everyone through whether he knew who they were or not. Well, lo and behold, leadership finds out and rips him a new one and comes down with a policy of visual confirmation is no longer an adequate means of access, and that we have to check every ID of every individual entering the installation. So we figure it's stupid, but hey, rules is rules. So the day goes on without much problem besides the random serious, "You know who I am," we were just hanging out and telling them, "Hey, I know, but policy has changed and it's 100% checks," and they realized, "Hey, you're right, things change all the time." Everything was going fine until base commander, a 2-star, comes through and we ID him. "Do you know who I am? Why are you IDing me?" "Of course, sir, you're Maj Gen Snuffy, base commander." "Then why are you IDing me?" "Well, because the policy that you signed says specifically, and I quote, absolutely no one is allowed through by visual confirmation. So after a few choice words about how he's the base commander, and saying he'll make sure it's dealt with appropriately, we get his ID, and offer him his proper customs and courtesies, and off he goes. Well, not more than 3 minutes later we get a call from flight chief about how dare we stop the base commander, we are never to do it again. And we're just like, well, the policy says to stop everyone and anyone. Yeah, the policy only lasted that shift until they changed it to pretty much no one but the top select individuals, pretty much anyone with a picture on our wall, was allowed visual confirmation, everyone else has to be eyed. Still was funny to stop the base commander due to his policy, that he signed and didn't think it could possibly bite him in the ass. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.